The gunshot echoed through the Sacramento Valley, and Violet Morgan watched from the main house window as every ranch hand scattered like startled quail. All except one man who stood his ground in the middle of the dusty yard, his shoulders rigid with barely contained fury. It was 1878, and the Morgan Ranch sprawled across 3,000 acres of California grassland, a testament to her father's 30 years of hard work before consumption had taken him the previous winter. Now the ranch belonged to Violet, all 22 years of her, and she was learning quickly that running a cattle operation meant dealing with men who did not take kindly to a woman's authority, especially men like Everett Turner. She had hired him 6 weeks ago when he rode in looking for work, his hat pulled low and his past clearly something he preferred to keep buried. He was good with horses, better than anyone she had ever seen, and he could work longer and harder than 3 men combined. But his temper was legendary even in that short time. Just yesterday he had thrown a saddle clear across the stable when one of the newer hands had left it improperly stored. The week before, he had grabbed another cowboy by the collar and lifted him clean off the ground for mistreating a mare. The ranch hands whispered about him in the bunkhouse, about fights in saloons from here to Arizona, about a man in Nevada who had pushed him too far and ended up with a broken jaw. They said he had killed a man once in self-defense, though no one could confirm it. What they all agreed on was that when Everett Turner's temper flared, you got out of his way. Violet pushed open the door and stepped onto the porch, her skirts swirling around her boots. The late afternoon sun blazed overhead, turning everything golden and harsh. Everett stood alone now, his pistol still in his hand, pointed at the sky. He had been shooting at crows that had been bothering the chickens, but the explosive sound had sent every man running. "Mr. Turner," she called out, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. He turned slowly, and she saw his jaw clench as he holstered the weapon. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and turbulent, set in a face that might have been handsome if not for the permanent scowl that seemed carved into his features. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they could break bones without much effort. "Miss Morgan," he said, his voice rough as gravel, "just taking care of the crow problem like you asked. I asked you to scare them off, not send my entire crew fleeing for cover." Something flickered in his expression, almost like amusement, but it was gone before she could be certain. "They are grown men. A gunshot should not spook them like green colts." "Maybe they would not be so spooked if they did not think you might turn that gun on them next time they make a mistake." His eyes hardened. "I have never drawn on any man who did not deserve it. That is not the point. You cannot keep terrorizing the hands every time something angers you. We have work to do, and they cannot do it if they are walking on eggshells around you." Everett took a step toward her, and despite herself, Violet felt a flutter of nervousness. He stopped at the base of the porch steps, looking up at her. From this angle she could see the tension in every line of his body, coiled tight like a spring ready to snap. "If your father were still alive, he would not tolerate half the laziness and incompetence I see around here every day," he said. "These men need discipline. These men need a foreman who does not make them fear for their safety," Violet shot back. "My father knew how to be firm without being cruel. There is a difference." For a long moment they stared at each other, and Violet refused to look away even though her instincts screamed at her to retreat into the safety of the house. Finally, Everett tipped his hat to her, the gesture somehow mocking. "As you say, Miss Morgan. I will try to be gentler with your delicate crew." He turned and strode toward the stables, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Violet watched him go, frustration and something else she could not quite name churning in her chest. She had dealt with difficult men before, but Everett Turner was different. There was something broken in him, something wounded and dangerous, and she did not know if she should try to fix it or simply send him down the road before he destroyed everything she was trying to build. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple over the distant hills, Violet sat at her father's old desk trying to make sense of the ranch accounts. Numbers had never been her strong suit, and the columns of figures seemed to swim before her eyes. They were barely breaking even, and if they did not get the herd to market in San Francisco before winter, they would be in serious trouble. A knock at the door startled her from her calculations. "Come in," she called, expecting her housekeeper, Martha, with the evening meal. Instead, Everett Turner ducked through the doorway, his hat in his hands. He looked uncomfortable in the confines of the house, too large and rough for the genteel furnishings her mother had chosen before her death 10 years ago. "Miss Morgan, I came to apologize," he said, the words seeming to pain him. "You were right. I should not have fired my weapon so close to the men without warning them first." Violet set down her pen, surprised. "That is very gracious of you, Mr. Turner." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly wanting to leave but forcing himself to stay. "I also wanted you to know that I will try harder to control my temper. I know it causes problems. Why is it so difficult for you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, too personal and direct. She expected him to shut down, to retreat behind his walls of anger and silence. Instead, he met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "I lost people I cared about because I was not strong enough to protect them. Now I cannot stand to see things done poorly, carelessly, because carelessness gets people killed. It makes me." He trailed off, his jaw working. "Angry," Violet finished softly. "Angry," he agreed. "All the time. At everything and everyone, but mostly at myself." The honesty in his words struck something deep within her. She stood, moving around the desk toward him. "I understand more than you might think. When my father died, I was so angry at him for leaving me, for not being stronger, for not fighting harder to stay alive. It was not rational, but grief rarely is." Everett looked down at his hat, his fingers worrying the brim. "My sister died 3 years ago. She was 16. There was a fire and I could not get to her in time." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with old pain. Violet felt tears prick her eyes. "I am so sorry." He shook his head sharply. "It was my fault. I should have been there. I should have protected her." "Fire is not something you can protect against with fists or guns, Mr. Turner. Sometimes terrible things happen, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop them." "That does not make it easier." "No," Violet agreed. "It does not." They stood in silence for a moment, and something shifted between them, some barrier crumbling just slightly. Then Everett cleared his throat and stepped back toward the door. "I should let you get back to your work. I just wanted to say my piece." "Mr. Turner," Violet called as he reached for the door handle. "Thank you for telling me. I know it was not easy." He nodded once, sharp and quick, and then he was gone, leaving Violet alone with her thoughts and the strange new awareness that perhaps Everett Turner was not the monster everyone believed him to be. The next morning brought trouble in the form of rustlers. 3 men rode onto Morgan land just after dawn and cut out 15 head of cattle from the main herd. By the time the alarm was raised, they were already driving the stolen beeves toward the hills. Violet was saddling her mare when Everett appeared at her side, his own horse already ready. "You are not coming," he said flatly. "Like hell I am not. Those are my cattle, and I will get them back. You stay here where it is safe." Violet tightened her saddle's cinch with more force than necessary. "This is my ranch, Mr. Turner, and I will not sit at home doing needlework while thieves steal my property. Now you can either ride with me or try to stop me, but I promise you that the latter will not end well for either of us." She saw anger flash across his face, but also something that might have been respect. "Fine. But you stay behind me if there is trouble. I will not have your death on my conscience along with everything else." They rode out with 4 other men, following the clear trail the rustlers had left in the soft ground. The tracks led up into the foothills, through stands of oak and pine that provided welcome shade from the climbing sun. Everett rode at the front, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain ahead, and Violet found herself watching him instead of the trail. He sat his horse like he was born to it, moving with the animal's rhythm in a way that suggested years in the saddle. His shoulders were relaxed now, no longer tight with barely controlled rage, and she wondered if this was what he was like when he was focused on something concrete, a problem he could solve with action rather than words. They found the rustlers camped in a small canyon, the stolen cattle already bearing fresh brands that marked them as the property of a ranch to the north. Everett held up a hand, signaling everyone to stop, and dismounted in silence. Violet followed suit, creeping forward with him to the edge of an outcropping that overlooked the camp. "3 men, just like we thought," Everett murmured. "They are armed but not expecting trouble. If we come at them from 2 sides, we can take them without gunfire." "And if they do not surrender?" one of the other hands asked nervously. Everett's expression hardened. "Then we do what we have to do, but let's try to take them alive. I would rather not have killing on Morgan land if we can avoid it." They split up, Everett taking 2 men around to the north while Violet and the others approached from the south. Her heart pounded as they picked their way through the rocks, trying to keep silent. She had her father's rifle in her hands, the weight of it familiar and reassuring. When Everett's voice rang out across the canyon, sharp and commanding, the rustlers spun toward the sound. "You are surrounded. Put down your weapons and step away from the cattle." For a moment, Violet thought they might comply. Then one of the men went for his gun, and everything erupted into chaos. Shots cracked through the air, echoing off the canyon walls. Violet saw Everett move with startling speed, closing the distance between himself and the nearest rustler before the man could properly aim. He slammed into him, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs. The other Morgan hands rushed forward, and within moments the fight was over. 2 of the rustlers were subdued and tied up, sullen but unharmed. The third, the one who had drawn first, lay on the ground with blood spreading across his shoulder. Everett knelt beside him, his face grim. "You are a fool," he told the wounded man. "Now you get to face the law with a bullet hole in you instead of just a rustling charge." "Go to hell," the rustler spat. Everett stood, shaking his head. "Bind his wound. We will take them all to the sheriff in Sacramento." The ride back was slow, hampered by the wounded man who kept slumping in his saddle. By the time they reached town, the sun was setting and Violet was exhausted. They turned the rustlers over to Sheriff Coleman, a gruff man in his 50s who promised to see them tried properly. As they rode back toward the ranch in the gathering darkness, Everett moved his horse alongside Violet's. "You did well today," he said quietly. "You kept your head when things got dangerous. Your father would have been proud." The unexpected praise warmed her more than it should have. "You kept your temper," she replied. "I was worried you might kill that man when he drew on you." "I wanted to," Everett admitted. "But you said I needed to control myself better. I am trying." Something in the way he said it, simple and honest, made Violet's chest tighten. "I appreciate that, and for what it is worth, I am glad you were there today. I do not think we could have handled them without you." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the stars beginning to appear overhead. When they reached the ranch, Everett helped her dismount, his hands steady on her waist. For a moment they stood close together, and Violet was suddenly very aware of his height, his strength, the way his gray eyes seemed to catch the moonlight. "Get some rest, Miss Morgan," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Tomorrow will be another long day." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and hurried toward the house. Only when she was safely inside did she allow herself to acknowledge the truth that had been building all day. She was beginning to care for Everett Turner in a way that had nothing to do with employer and employee. The next weeks passed in a blur of work. The cattle needed to be moved to better grazing, fences needed mending, and a dozen other tasks demanded attention from sunup to sundown. Violet worked alongside her men, refusing to hide in the big house while they labored in the heat. Everett seemed to be everywhere at once, fixing what was broken, training the younger hands, working with the horses until they responded to the slightest touch. He still had a temper, still snapped at carelessness and stupidity, but the volcanic rage seemed banked now, controlled. The other hands were beginning to trust him, even to like him, though they would never admit it out loud. One evening, as Violet was heading back from checking the southern fence line, her horse stumbled in a gopher hole. She had just enough time to kick free of the stirrups before the mare went down, throwing Violet hard against the ground. Pain exploded through her shoulder and head, and for a moment the world went gray at the edges. When her vision cleared, Everett was kneeling beside her, his face pale with concern. "Do not move," he ordered. "Tell me what hurts." "My shoulder," she managed. "And my head. How is my horse?" "She is fine, limping but fine. You took the worst of it." His hands were gentle as they probed her shoulder, checking for breaks. "Can you wiggle your fingers?" She did, wincing at the pain. "Yes." "Good. Nothing broken then, just badly bruised, but you hit your head hard. We need to get you back to the house." He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, settling her on his own horse before mounting behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and Violet found herself leaning back against his chest, too tired and hurting to maintain any proper distance. "How did you know I was hurt?" she asked as they rode slowly back toward the ranch buildings. "I saw your horse come back without you, nearly gave me a heart attack." There was something raw in his voice, fear not quite masked. "I thought—" He did not finish the sentence. "I am fine, Everett, just shaken up." It was the first time she had used his given name, and she felt him tense behind her. But he did not correct her, and his arms tightened fractionally around her waist. By the time they reached the house, Martha was already waiting, alerted by one of the hands. She clucked over Violet like a worried hen, helping her inside and up to her room. Everett hovered in the hallway, clearly wanting to help but aware it would not be proper. "I will be fine," Violet assured him. "Thank you for bringing me back." "I will check on you tomorrow," he said, and then he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs. That night, as Martha helped her into her nightdress, Violet caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her hair had come loose from its pins, tangled and full of dirt and grass. She reached up to try to brush it out with her fingers, but her injured shoulder protested sharply. "Here, let me," Martha said, reaching for the brush. But before the older woman could help, there was a soft knock at the door. Martha opened it to reveal Everett, looking uncomfortable and determined in equal measure. "I know this is not proper," he said, "but I wanted to make sure Miss Morgan was all right." Martha looked between them, her eyes shrewd, then stepped back. "I will go prepare some willow bark tea for the pain. You can stay until I return, Mr. Turner, but no longer." She left, and Everett entered the room hesitantly, as if afraid he might break something. Violet sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly very aware that she was in her nightdress, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You did not have to check on me," she said softly. "I told you I was fine. I needed to see for myself." He crossed the room to stand in front of her, his eyes searching her face. "When I saw your horse without you, I thought, I cannot lose anyone else, Violet, I cannot." Her name on his lips sent a shiver through her. "You did not lose me, I am right here." He reached out slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with his fingertips. The gesture was so gentle, so at odds with his reputation for violence, that Violet felt tears prick her eyes. "Your hair is all tangled," he said. "Does it hurt when you try to brush it?" "My shoulder makes it difficult to raise my arms." He picked up the brush from the dresser. "May I?" Violet nodded, not trusting her voice. Everett moved behind her and began to work through the tangles with careful, patient strokes. His hands were surprisingly gentle, easing the brush through her long brown hair with a care that made her heart ache. "My sister had long hair," he said quietly as he worked. "I used to brush it for her every night after our mother died. She said I was better at it than she was, that I never pulled or tugged." "How old were you when your mother passed?" 14. "Sarah was only 7. Our father was a drunk who disappeared more than he was home, so it was just the two of us most of the time. I did my best to take care of her, to keep her safe and happy." His hands paused in her hair. "I failed her in the end." Violet reached back and caught his wrist, squeezing gently. "You did not fail her, Everett. You loved her and you did everything you could. That is what matters." He resumed brushing, working through the last few tangles until her hair hung smooth and shining down her back. "There," he said, his voice rough. "Like silk." Violet turned to face him, and the look in his eyes stole her breath. It was full of longing and fear and something that might have been love, all tangled together in a way that mirrored her own confused feelings. "Everett," she began, but Martha's footsteps sounded on the stairs. He stepped back quickly, setting the brush down. "I should go. Rest well, Violet." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her sitting on the bed with her heart racing and her mind spinning. Everything had changed in those few quiet moments, the air between them charged with possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning, Violet woke to find her shoulder stiff and aching but not unbearable. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple work dress that did not require Martha's help with buttons, and made her way downstairs. Everett was waiting in the kitchen, hat in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "I wanted to see how you were feeling before starting the day's work." "Sore but functional," Violet replied, pouring herself coffee. "Thank you for last night, for everything." A faint color rose in his cheeks. "It was nothing." "It was not nothing to me." They looked at each other across the kitchen table, and the air seemed to thicken between them. Martha bustled in with eggs and bread, breaking the moment, and they ate breakfast in companionable silence. Over the next week, Violet noticed a change in Everett. He still worked hard, still demanded excellence from the men, but there was a new softness to him when he looked at her. He found excuses to be near her, offering to help with tasks she could easily do herself, riding beside her when she checked the property lines. The other hands noticed too, exchanging glances and whispers when they thought no one was watching. But no one said anything directly, perhaps afraid of Everett's temper, or perhaps understanding that something precious was growing between their boss and the dangerous cowboy, who had somehow found his way to the Morgan ranch. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after her fall, Violet sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She heard boots on the wooden steps and smiled without turning around. "Good evening, Everett." He settled into the chair beside her, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "How did you know it was me? I recognize your walk." "Is that so?" There was amusement in his voice. "And what does my walk sound like? Confident, purposeful." Like you always know exactly where you are going and will not let anything stand in your way. He laughed, a rare sound that made her smile wider. I am not sure that is always true. Lately, I feel like I am stumbling around in the dark, not sure of anything. Violet turned to look at him. What are you unsure about? His gray eyes met hers, and the vulnerability in them made her breath catch. Whatever is happening between us. I am unsure too, she admitted. I never expected to feel this way about anyone, least of all my most temperamental ranch hand. Is that what I am? Just a ranch hand? No, Violet said softly. You are much more than that. You are someone who makes me feel safe and challenged in equal measure. Someone who saw me at my worst, covered in dirt with tangled hair, and treated me like I was precious. Someone who is trying to be better than his past, and succeeding more than he realizes. Everett reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. You make me want to be better, Violet. When I am around you, the anger does not seem so overwhelming. It is like you shine a light into all the dark places I have been hiding in. Then stop hiding, she said. Stay in the light with me. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth racing through her entire body. I want nothing more. But I need you to understand what you would be getting into. I am not an easy man. I have done things I am not proud of. There are people who would say you deserve better. And what do you say? I say that you deserve everything good in this world. I just hope I can be part of that instead of something that drags you down. Violet stood and moved to stand in front of him, placing her hands on his shoulders. You are not a burden, Everett Turner. You are a gift, even if you do not see it yet. He looked up at her, and then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he drew her down onto his lap. His arms came around her, careful of her still healing shoulder, and he rested his forehead against hers. I am going to kiss you now, he said, his breath warm against her lips. If you do not want that, you need to tell me. I want that, Violet whispered. I have wanted that for weeks. His mouth found hers, gentle at first and then deeper as she responded. He kissed her like she was something rare and precious, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held on too tight. Violet threaded her fingers through his dark hair and let herself fall into the sensation, into the rightness of being in his arms. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Everett cupped her face in his hands. I love you, he said, the words simple and sure. I did not think I was capable of feeling this way again after Sarah died, after I locked all that softness away. But you found a way through all my walls, and now I cannot imagine my life without you in it. I love you too, Violet replied, her eyes bright with tears. I think I started falling for you the first time I saw you stand your ground when everyone else ran. You are the strongest man I have ever known, and not because of your fists or your temper, because of your heart. They sat together on the porch as the stars came out, talking quietly about their pasts and their hopes for the future. Everett told her about growing up poor in Texas, about doing whatever work he could find to keep himself and Sarah fed and clothed. He spoke of the years after her death, when he had drifted from ranch to ranch, from town to town, always moving before the anger inside him could put down roots. Violet shared her own stories, about growing up as the only child of ambitious parents, about learning to ride and rope before she could read properly. She told him about the fear she had felt when her father died, leaving her alone and responsible for 3,000 acres and 20 employees. She admitted that she had considered selling, taking the money and running to San Francisco to live a simpler life. I am glad you did not, Everett said, his arms tightening around her. If you had sold, I never would have found you. Maybe we would have met in San Francisco. You could have been a policeman, and I could have been a society lady, and we would have scandalized everyone by falling in love, he chuckled. "I do not think I am cut out for city life. I need space and open sky. Too many people make me nervous." "Then it is fortunate that I have plenty of space and sky to offer." They fell silent, content just to be close, until Martha appeared in the doorway and cleared her throat meaningfully. "Miss Violet, it is getting late and quite cold. Perhaps Mr. Turner should escort you inside before you catch a chill." Violet stood reluctantly, and Everett rose with her. At the door, he kissed her once more, soft and lingering, then tipped his hat to Martha. "Good night, ladies. I will see you both in the morning." As Violet prepared for bed, Martha helped her with her buttons and said nothing about finding her employer on the cowboy's lap. But there was a small smile on the older woman's face that suggested approval, and Violet felt a surge of gratitude for the woman who had been like a second mother to her. That night, she dreamed of gray eyes and gentle hands, of a future where anger was transformed into passion and love could heal even the deepest wounds. The next month brought the hard work of preparing the herd for the drive to San Francisco. They needed to cut out the cattle that were ready for market, brand the new calves, and ensure everything was in order before the long journey west to the coast. Everett worked from dawn until well after dark, his shirt soaked with sweat as he roped and wrestled nearly 2 tons of ornery beef into submission. But no matter how tired he was, he always found time in the evening to sit with Violet, to talk about their day and steal kisses in the shadows of the porch. One night, he appeared at her door long after the house had gone dark. Violet was sitting at her vanity in her nightgown, trying to brush the day's dust from her hair, when she heard the soft tap on her window. She opened it to find Everett standing outside, his face barely visible in the moonlight. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "If anyone sees you here, your reputation will be ruined. Then let me in before someone spots me standing out here like a fool." She stepped back, and he climbed through the window with surprising grace for such a large man. Once inside, he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I could not sleep," he said into her hair. "I kept thinking about you up here all alone, and I needed to see you. This is highly improper, Mr. Turner." "I know. Do you want me to leave?" Violet pulled back just enough to look up at him. "No, but I do want you to make yourself useful. My shoulder is still too sore for me to brush my hair properly." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming him from dangerous to devastating. "I think I can manage that." He took the brush from her hand and guided her to sit on the edge of the bed. Then, with the same care he had shown before, he began to work through the tangles. They talked in whispers about everything and nothing, and when her hair hung smooth and shining down her back, he gathered it up and began to braid it. "Where did you learn to braid?" Violet asked, surprised by his skill. Sarah liked her hair braided for sleeping. She said it kept it from getting too tangled overnight. "I must have braided her hair 1,000 times." His fingers moved with practiced ease, weaving the strands together. "I never thought I would do this for anyone else. It felt too personal, too tied to memories of her." "Thank you for sharing this with me," Violet said softly. "I know it cannot be easy." He finished the braid and tied it off with a ribbon from her dresser. Then he turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "Nothing about you is easy, Violet Morgan. You make me feel things I thought were dead. You make me want things I never believed I could have. You make me hope, and hope is the most terrifying thing of all." "Why terrifying?" "Because hoping means there is something to lose. I lost Sarah because I hoped she would be safe, hoped that one night alone would not matter. I cannot lose you too." Violet took his hands, holding them tight. "You are not going to lose me. I am not going anywhere." "You cannot promise that. None of us can." "Then I will promise this instead. For as long as I have breath in my body, I will be yours. and I will fight with everything I have to stay by your side. Is that enough?" He kissed her then, deep and searching, pouring everything he could not say into the connection between them. When they parted, his gray eyes were suspiciously bright. "It is more than I deserve," he said roughly, "but I will take it and be grateful for every single day." They lay down together on top of the covers, fully clothed, and Everett held her close as they talked until sleep finally claimed them both. When Violet woke in the early hours before dawn, he was already gone, but the braid remained perfect in her hair, and a single wildflower lay on the pillow beside her. The drive to San Francisco was scheduled for late September, when the worst of the summer heat had passed, but before the autumn rains could turn the roads to mud. The afternoon before they were set to leave, Violet called Everett into her father's study. He entered looking concerned, his hat in his hands. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I just wanted to discuss something important with you before we leave tomorrow." She gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing, tense and wary. Violet sighed and walked over to him, taking his hands in hers. "You are not in trouble, Everett, I promise." Some of the tension left his shoulders. "Then what is this about? I have been thinking about the future of the ranch, about what comes after we sell this herd and return home. And I have realized that I do not want to do it alone anymore." His gray eyes searched her face. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I want you beside me, not just as my best ranch hand but as my partner, in every way." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I am asking you to marry me, Everett Turner." For a moment he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, and he let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You want to marry me? A man with a temper and a past and more rough edges than smooth ones." "I want to marry you," Violet confirmed. "The man who treats horses with more gentleness than most people show children. The man who braids my hair like silk every night. The man who makes me feel strong and protected and loved. Say yes, Everett, please say yes." He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "Yes," he said, laughing. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. I will marry you, Violet Morgan, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." She kissed him fiercely, joy bubbling up inside her like champagne. When she pulled back, she was grinning so wide her cheeks hurt. "Should I be wearing a ring?" Everett asked, suddenly looking uncertain. "I know that is traditional, but I do not have any money saved for something like that." "Everything I earn goes to the general store for clothes and supplies." "I do not need a ring," Violet assured him. "I just need you. Besides, I have something better." She crossed to her father's desk and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out a small wooden box. Inside were 2 silver bands, simple and elegant. "These were my parents' wedding rings. My father gave them to me before he died and told me to save them for when I found someone worthy." She handed the larger ring to Everett. "I think he would have liked you. You remind me of him in some ways, that same stubborn determination to do right by the people you care about." Everett turned the ring over in his fingers, his expression awed. "I will wear it with pride, and I promise to honor the legacy of the man who built all of this." They exchanged rings there in the study, speaking simple vows to each other with no witnesses, except the portraits of Violet's parents on the wall. It was not legal or official, but it felt right, and they both knew they would make it formal when they returned from San Francisco. That evening, as the ranch hands gathered around the fire for their last night before the drive, Violet stood with Everett at her side and made an announcement. "I want you all to know that Mr. Turner and I are engaged to be married. When we return from the drive, we will be having a proper wedding, and you are all invited." There was a moment of stunned silence, and then cheers erupted from the men. They crowded around to offer congratulations, slapping Everett on the back and teasing him good-naturedly about being tied down. To Violet's surprise, her normally taciturn fiancé took it all with good humor, even laughing at some of the more ribald jokes. Later, as they sat together watching the fire burn low, one of the older hands, a grizzled man named Pete, approached them. "Congratulations, boss," he said to Violet. Then he turned to Everett. "You are a lucky man, Turner, but I think she might be lucky too. You have changed since you came here, become steadier. Whatever demons you were fighting seem quieter now." Everett glanced at Violet, his eyes soft. "She gave me a reason to fight those demons instead of running from them. That makes all the difference." The drive to San Francisco took 12 days, pushing 200 head of cattle along dusty roads and through small towns where curious locals came out to watch them pass. Everett rode point most days, his natural authority keeping the herd moving smoothly, while Violet managed the logistics and dealt with any problems that arose. They camped under the stars each night, the men taking turns on watch while the cattle settled down to graze and rest. Everett always made sure his bedroll was positioned near Violet's, close enough to talk quietly after everyone else had fallen asleep, but far enough to maintain propriety. On the 5th night, a storm rolled in from the coast, bringing wind and lightning that spooked the cattle into a stampede. Violet found herself in the middle of chaos, her horse wheeling and dodging as massive animals thundered past in the darkness. She heard Everett shouting orders, trying to turn the herd, but the noise was overwhelming. Then her horse stumbled, and she felt herself falling. She hit the ground hard, rolling instinctively to avoid the hooves that pounded all around her. Strong hands grabbed her and hauled her up, and she found herself pressed against Everett's chest as he pulled her out of the path of the stampede. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice harsh with fear. "No, I am fine, just shaken." He held her for another moment, his heart pounding against her cheek, then released her. "Stay here. I need to help turn the herd before they run themselves to death." He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the storm on his horse. Violet found her own mount, miraculously unhurt, and remounted despite her trembling hands. She might be scared, but she was not going to hide while her men risked their lives to save her cattle. It took hours to calm the herd and get them settled again. By the time the storm passed, and dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they had accounted for all the cattle and all the men, though several sported injuries from the wild ride. Everett found Violet tending to a young cowboy who had been thrown from his horse. His face was pale beneath the dust and rain, and when he saw she was safe, he closed his eyes briefly in relief. "Do not ever scare me like that again," he said as he approached. "When I saw you fall, I thought my heart would stop." "I am fine," Violet assured him. "Thanks to you." He pulled her against him, right there in front of all the men, and held her tight. No one said anything, understanding that they had just witnessed something profound, the moment when Everett Turner's legendary control had finally cracked under the weight of his love. They reached San Francisco a week later, driving the herd through streets that seemed impossibly crowded and noisy after the open range. The stockyards were located on the outskirts of the city, and the buyer Violet had arranged to meet was waiting for them with cash and contracts. The sale went smoothly, netting the Morgan Ranch more money than they had made in the previous 2 years combined. Violet counted the bills carefully, then tucked them into a locked box for the journey home. "We should celebrate," Everett said as they left the stockyards. "When was the last time you did something just for fun?" Violet thought about it. "I honestly cannot remember. Before my father got sick, certainly. Then tonight we are going to dinner at a real restaurant, one with tablecloths and waiters and food neither of us can pronounce." You deserve to be treated like the lady you are, at least for one evening." He took her to a restaurant overlooking the bay, where the setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and orange. Violet wore the one nice dress she had brought, a deep blue silk that had been her mother's, and Everett had purchased a new shirt and jacket from a local store. They ate food that was indeed difficult to pronounce, laughing at their own ignorance and not caring who heard them. Everett told her stories about the places he had been, the people he had met, and for the first time those stories did not seem tinged with regret and anger. After dinner, they walked along the waterfront, Violet's hand tucked into the crook of Everett's arm. The city lights reflected on the dark water and the air smelled of salt and fish and possibility. "I could never live here," Everett said, looking at the crowded streets. "Too many people, too much noise. It makes my skin crawl." "I feel the same way," Violet admitted. "I prefer the quiet of the ranch, the space to breathe. But it is nice to visit, to remember there is a world beyond cattle and fences." He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Violet, I know we already exchanged vows in private, but I want to do this properly. Will you marry me in a church, with witnesses and flowers and everything a bride deserves? Will you let me stand up in front of God and everyone and promise to love you for the rest of my days?" "Yes," Violet said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you in any way you want, as many times as you want." He kissed her there on the waterfront, with the city bustling around them and the ocean whispering its approval. It was perfect and imperfect, romantic and awkward, and exactly what Violet had never known she wanted. They spent that night in a hotel, in separate rooms to maintain propriety, but Violet woke in the small hours to find Everett tapping at her window again. She let him in, laughing quietly at his persistence. "I cannot seem to stay away from you," he admitted as he settled into the chair beside her bed. "I tried to sleep, but all I could think about was you in this room all alone. I was hardly in danger in a locked hotel room. Logic has nothing to do with it. I just needed to see you." Violet patted the edge of the bed. "Then sit with me properly instead of lurking in that uncomfortable chair." He moved to sit beside her, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. "Tell me about your dreams, Everett. What do you want from life beyond surviving day to day?" He was quiet for a long moment, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I want to build something that lasts. I have spent so many years drifting, never putting down roots because I was afraid they would be torn up again. But with you, I want to plant those roots deep. I want to expand the ranch, build a house for us that is separate from the main house but still close enough that you can manage everything. I want children, a whole house full of them, so they never have to be lonely like Sarah and I were." He paused, his voice growing rough. "I want to deserve you, Violet. That is my biggest dream of all." "You already deserve me," she said fiercely. "You deserve happiness and peace and love. You have been punishing yourself for 3 years for something that was never your fault. It is time to let Sarah rest and live the life she would have wanted for you." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes bright with unshed tears. "How did I get so lucky? How did I stumble onto the Morgan Ranch at exactly the right time to meet you? Maybe Sarah was watching over you, guiding you to where you needed to be." Everett smiled, sad and sweet. "I like to think that. I like to imagine her somewhere peaceful, happy that I finally found my way home." They talked until the sky began to lighten, speaking of hopes and fears and all the small details that make up a life. When Everett finally climbed back out the window to return to his own room before the hotel staff began stirring, Violet felt like she knew him more deeply than anyone she had ever met. The journey back to the ranch took 10 days without the cattle to slow them down. They rode hard, eager to return home and begin planning the wedding. The men sang trail songs and told stories, their spirits high from the successful sale and the prospect of a celebration to come. When they finally crested the last hill and saw the Morgan Ranch spread out below them, Violet felt a surge of love for the land that had been in her family for 3 decades. This was where she belonged, where she and Everett would build their future together. Martha met them at the house, her face wreathed in smiles. "Welcome back, Miss Violet, Mr. Turner. I heard congratulations are in order." "They are indeed," Violet confirmed, dismounting and hugging the older woman. "We want to have the wedding as soon as possible. Can you help me plan everything?" "It would be my pleasure. We will make it an event the whole county will remember." Over the next 3 weeks, the ranch was transformed. Martha coordinated with the other women from nearby properties, and together they cleaned and decorated and cooked until everything was perfect. Violet sewed her wedding dress with her own hands, using white silk she had purchased in San Francisco, while Everett worked on building the new house he had promised. It was just a small cabin for now, 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. He built it with careful attention to every detail, making sure the windows faced east to catch the sunrise and the porch was large enough for 2 rocking chairs. When it was finished, he carried Violet over the threshold even though they were not yet married. "Practice," he said with a grin. "I want to make sure I do not drop you on our wedding night." The wedding took place on a crisp October afternoon, with the hills painted gold and red by autumn's touch. The local preacher came out from Sacramento to perform the ceremony, and what felt like half the county showed up to witness it. Violet walked down a makeshift aisle between rows of chairs, her hand on the arm of the foreman who had been with her father for 20 years. She wore her white silk dress and a crown of wildflowers, and she had never felt more beautiful. But it was Everett who took her breath away. He stood at the altar in a new black suit, his dark hair slicked back and his gray eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. As she approached, she saw his hands trembling slightly, and she loved him even more for showing that vulnerability. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred bond between husband and wife. Everett and Violet exchanged the rings they had already given each other in private, but this time they spoke their vows aloud for all to hear. "I promise to love you in sickness and in health, in prosperity and in hardship," Everett said, his voice strong and clear. "I promise to honor you, to protect you, and to stand beside you as an equal partner in all things. I promise to braid your hair every night and to remind you how precious you are every single day. I promise to be worthy of the gift you have given me, the gift of your love and your trust." Violet's voice shook with emotion as she spoke her own vows. "I promise to love you with everything I am and everything I have. I promise to see the man you are, not the man your past says you should be. I promise to build a life with you, to raise our children together, and to grow old by your side. I promise to be your refuge when the world becomes too much, and to celebrate with you when joy comes. I promise to love you until my last breath and beyond." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Everett kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the audience wiped away tears. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Violet felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The reception lasted until well after dark, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Everett danced with Violet to a fiddle tune, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a large man. He smiled more in those few hours than she had seen in all the time she had known him. As the evening wound down, they slipped away to their new cabin, leaving the party still going strong behind them. Inside, someone had lit candles and left wildflowers in vases on every surface. The bed was made with crisp new sheets, and a fire crackled cheerfully in the small fireplace. Everett closed the door behind them and leaned against it, just looking at Violet with wonder in his eyes. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied truthfully. "Are you?" He crossed to her and took her face in his hands, his touch achingly gentle. "I am terrified and grateful and so full of love I do not know how my chest contains it all. You have given me everything, Violet. A home, a purpose, a reason to believe in tomorrow. I will spend the rest of my life trying to give you even a fraction of what you have given me." She kissed him then, pouring all her own love and hope and joy into that connection. They took their time that night, learning each other with patient tenderness, building a bond that would sustain them through all the years to come. Later, as they lay tangled together in the firelight, Everett brushed Violet's hair back from her face. "May I braid it for you?" she smiled. "I was hoping you would." He sat up and helped her sit between his knees, then took up the brush and began the familiar ritual. His hands moved with practiced ease, creating a perfect braid that he tied off with a silk ribbon. "Every night for the rest of our lives," he murmured against her hair. "I want to do this every night and remember how lucky I am." Violet turned in his arms and kissed him slowly. "Every night for the rest of our lives," she agreed. "And every morning I will wake up grateful that you stumbled onto the Morgan Ranch and into my heart." They made love again as the fire burned low, and when they finally slept, it was wrapped in each other's arms, safe and content and home. The first year of their marriage brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. The ranch prospered under their joint management, with Everett handling the day-to-day operations and the men while Violet managed the finances and business relationships. They made a formidable team, and soon the Morgan Ranch was known throughout California as one of the best-run operations in the state. Everett's temper continued to improve, though there were still days when the old anger flared. But now he had Violet to talk to help him process his emotions before they exploded into violence. The ranch hands came to respect him not just for his skill but for his fairness, and several men who had considered leaving decided to stay because of the stability he brought to the operation. In the spring, Violet discovered she was pregnant. She told Everett one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, his hands working through her hair in the nightly ritual that had become sacred to them both. "I have news," she said, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. His hands paused in her hair. "Good news or bad news? That depends on your perspective. We are going to have a baby." For a moment there was only silence. Then Everett spun her around to face him, his eyes wide with wonder. "Truly, you are certain as I can be. Martha confirmed my suspicions this afternoon." He let out a whoop of joy that probably woke every animal within a mile radius and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. "We are going to be parents. Violet, we are going to have a child." "Are you happy?" she asked, laughing at his enthusiasm. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am ecstatic, terrified but ecstatic." He set her down carefully as if she might break. "You are feeling well. No sickness or pain, just a little nausea in the mornings. Martha says that is normal." He dropped to his knees in front of her, placing his hands on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I just want you to know that I already love you more than I thought possible, and I promise to protect you and your mother with everything I have." Violet ran her fingers through his hair, her eyes stinging with tears. "You are going to be an amazing father, Everett." He looked up at her, vulnerability and hope mingling in his expression. I want to give our children everything I could not give Sarah. Safety, stability, a childhood full of love and laughter. I want them to never doubt for a single moment that they are wanted and cherished. They will have all of that and more, Violet assured him. We will build it together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer, though Violet grew increasingly frustrated with the limitations her growing belly imposed. Everett hovered like a nervous mother hen, constantly worried that she was doing too much or putting herself at risk. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from riding out to check the fences. "Women have been having babies while working ranches for generations. I will be fine." "I know, but I worry. I cannot help it." She softened at the concern in his eyes. "I love that you care so much, but you have to trust me to know my own limits. I promise I will be careful." He relented, though she often caught him watching her with worried eyes whenever she did anything more strenuous than sitting on the porch. At night, after he braided her hair, he would talk to the baby, telling stories about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together when the child was old enough. In late November, as the first winter storms rolled in from the coast, Violet went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Everett paced the hallway outside their bedroom like a caged animal, occasionally trying to barge in until Martha shooed him away. Finally, just as the sun was setting on the second day, a thin wail split the air. Everett stopped pacing, his whole body tense as he waited. Then Martha appeared in the doorway, a tired smile on her face. "You have a son, Mr. Turner, a healthy, loud baby boy, and your wife is asking for you." He nearly knocked the older woman over in his rush to get into the room. Violet lay propped up in bed, pale and exhausted but smiling as she cradled a small bundle against her chest. She looked up as he entered, and her smile widened. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Everett approached slowly, as if afraid he might wake from a dream. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a rosebud mouth, and as Everett watched, his eyes opened to reveal the same gray color as his father's. "He is perfect," Everett whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand with his finger. The baby's fingers curled around it, holding on with surprising strength. "He is the most perfect thing I have ever seen." "What should we name him?" Violet asked. "We never did decide." Everett thought for a moment, his eyes never leaving his son's face. "Jacob. After my grandfather, the only member of my family who was worth a damn. Jacob Thomas Turner." "Jacob," Violet repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Jacob Turner. You are already so loved." Everett carefully took the baby from her arms, cradling him with a gentleness that belied his rough exterior. He stood and walked to the window, showing Jacob the ranch that would one day be his legacy. "This is your home, son. These are your mountains, your valleys, your sky. Your mother and I built this for you, and we will teach you to care for it and make it even better than we found it." His voice cracked with emotion. "And I promise you will never doubt that you are loved. I promise you will grow up safe and happy and free." Violet watched them standing there, her husband and her son outlined against the last light of day, and felt such overwhelming love that she thought she might burst with it. This was what she had been working toward her whole life, this moment of perfect contentment. The next years passed in a blur of sleepless nights and first words and tiny footsteps. Jacob grew into a sturdy, cheerful child with his father's gray eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. Everett was a devoted father, patient in ways that surprised everyone who remembered his legendary temper. He taught Jacob to ride almost before the boy could walk, setting him on the gentlest mare and leading them around the yard while Jacob shrieked with laughter. When Jacob was 3, Violet became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring she delivered a healthy daughter they named Rose, after Violet's mother. Rose had her mother's brown eyes and a head full of golden curls that Everett loved to play with. "Now I have 2 heads of hair to braid," he joked as he practiced making tiny braids in Rose's baby curls. "I am the luckiest man alive." The ranch continued to prosper, expanding to over 4,000 acres as they purchased neighboring properties from owners looking to retire or move on. Everett's reputation transformed from dangerous cowboy with a temper to respected rancher and businessman. Men came from all over California seeking employment at the Morgan Turner Ranch, knowing it was well run and fair. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Violet and Everett sat on their porch watching Jacob chase Rose around the yard, their laughter ringing through the evening air. Everett had just finished braiding Violet's hair, and she leaned back against him with a contented sigh. "Are you happy?" she asked, echoing the question he had asked on their wedding night. "More than I ever dreamed possible," he replied. "There are still hard days, times when the anger tries to claw its way back up. But then I look at you and our children, at this life we have built together, and it all fades away." "You saved me, Violet. You took a broken, angry man and showed him how to be whole again." "You saved yourself," she corrected gently. "I just gave you a reason to want to try." He kissed the top of her head. "However it happened, I am grateful. Every single day I am grateful." Jacob came running up to the porch, his face flushed with exertion. "Papa, tell us the story about how you and Mama met, please." Everett laughed and pulled the boy onto his lap while Violet lifted Rose. "Again, I told you that story just last night, but I like it. It is my favorite." So Everett told the story again, about how he had come to the ranch looking for work and found so much more. He told them about the first time he braided their mother's hair, about the cattle drive to San Francisco, about standing up in front of God and everyone to promise his love. He edited out the darker parts, the violence and pain, saving those conversations for when they were older. Jacob listened with rapt attention even though he had heard it dozens of times, and Rose fell asleep in Violet's arms, soothed by her father's deep voice. When the story was finished, Everett carried Jacob to bed while Violet settled Rose in her cradle. They met in the hallway between the children's rooms, and Everett pulled Violet into his arms. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "For what?" "For giving me this. For loving me when I did not think I deserved it. For building a family with me and making every single day worth living." Violet pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "You have given me just as much. You made me feel strong and safe and cherished. You turned a lonely ranch owner into a wife and mother. You gave me everything I never knew I was missing." They kissed there in the hallway, a sweet reaffirmation of the vows they had spoken 7 years ago, and then walked hand in hand back to their own room. As Everett carefully braided Violet's hair like silk for what must have been the 2,000th time, they talked about their plans for the future. They wanted to build a proper school on the ranch for Jacob and Rose and the children of their employees. They discussed expanding the horse breeding operation, an area where Everett's expertise could really shine. They dreamed about the grandchildren they would one day have, about watching their legacy continue for generations. "You ever miss your old life?" Violet asked. "The freedom of drifting from place to place with no ties." Everett paused in his braiding to consider the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, but I would not trade what I have now for anything in the world. Those years of drifting, I was not free. I was running, scared to stop moving because stopping meant facing everything I had lost. This life, with you and our children, this is real freedom. The freedom to be happy, to build something lasting, to finally put down roots and know they will not be torn up." He finished the braid and tied it off, then wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Every hand on this ranch used to fear my temper. Now they respect me, some even like me. That change is because of you, because you saw past the anger to the man I could become. You always were that man, Violet said softly. You just needed someone to help you see it. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the candle flicker on the bedside table. Outside, the ranch settled down for the night, horses whickering softly in the stable, cattle lowing in the distant pastures. It was the sound of home, of peace, of a life well lived. Years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays and the endless cycle of ranch work. Jacob and Rose grew tall and strong, learning the business from their parents and developing their own skills and interests. Jacob loved the cattle, spending hours studying bloodlines and breeding strategies, while Rose had inherited her father's gift with horses and could gentle even the wildest Mustang. Everett's hair began to gray at the temples, and Violet found laugh lines appearing around her eyes. They wore these signs of aging with pride, badges of a life filled with joy and hard work. Every night, without fail, Everett braided Violet's hair, and she would sit content in the knowledge that this ritual connected them to their past and anchored them in their present. When Jacob turned 18, he took over more of the daily operations, freeing Everett and Violet to focus on the business side of the ranch. Rose, at 16, announced her intention to start a horse training program that would be recognized throughout the state. Her parents supported her ambition, giving her the resources and space to build her dream. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the whole ranch gathered for a celebration. The children had organized everything in secret, decorating the barn with flowers and lanterns, and preparing a feast that rivaled their wedding reception. As Violet and Everett walked in and saw the effort their children and employees had put into honoring their marriage, they both had tears in their eyes. "To Mama and Papa," Jacob said, raising his glass in a toast. "You built this ranch with your hands and your hearts. You showed us what it means to love completely, to forgive freely, and to build something that lasts. We are all better for knowing you and being part of this family." The crowd cheered, and Everett pulled Violet close, kissing her in front of everyone the way he had on their wedding day. She laughed against his lips, her heart full to bursting. Later, as they walked back to their cabin under a sky full of stars, Everett said, "Do you remember the first time I braided your hair? Of course. You had come to check on me after I fell from my horse. I was sitting on my bed in my nightgown, and you were so careful, so gentle. I think that was when I started falling in love with you, though I did not realize it at the time. I knew," Everett admitted. "I knew that night that you were going to change my life. I was terrified and hopeful in equal measure, and I almost ran. Almost saddled my horse and left before dawn because caring about someone again felt too dangerous." "What stopped you?" He smiled, pulling her closer. "You did. The thought of never seeing you again, never hearing your voice or watching the way you bite your lip when you are thinking, it was worse than the fear. So I stayed, and you made a coward into a man worth something." "You were always worth something," Violet said fiercely. "You just had to believe it." They reached their cabin, the same one Everett had built before their wedding, though they had added rooms over the years as their family grew. Inside, everything was familiar and comfortable, full of memories and love. Everett sat Violet down and picked up her brush, beginning the nightly ritual that had sustained them through 20 years of marriage. His hands moved with the same care they always had, treating her hair like precious silk, and Violet closed her eyes and let herself simply feel the love in every stroke. "You know what I am most proud of?" Everett asked as he worked. "What?" that I kept my promise. I told you on our wedding day that I would braid your hair every night and remind you how precious you are. 20 years, and I have not missed a single night unless I was away from the ranch. And even then, I hated every moment of being apart. Violet opened her eyes and looked at him in the mirror. You have kept every promise you ever made to me. You have been my partner, my protector, my best friend, and the love of my life. I could not have asked for a better husband or father for our children. He finished the braid and turned her to face him, cupping her face in his work-roughened hands. Here is to 20 more years and 20 after that, and however many we are blessed with. I will love you until my last breath, Violet Turner, and beyond. And I will love you, she replied, kissing him softly. Forever and always. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion of young hearts, proving that time had only deepened the connection between them. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about their dreams for the next chapter of their lives. I want to travel, Violet said. Just you and me, exploring all the places we have only read about in books. Rose and Jacob are old enough to manage the ranch for a few months at a time. I would like that, Everett agreed. Though I will always be happiest right here on this land with you beside me. As will I. But it would be nice to see the ocean again, maybe visit the East Coast and experience a real autumn with leaves that change colors. Then, that is what we will do. After Rose's wedding next spring, we will plan a trip. Just the two of us, like a second honeymoon. Violet snuggled closer, perfectly content. You have given me such a beautiful life, Everett Turner. We gave it to each other, he corrected. Every good thing I have, every happy moment, it all stems from the day I rode onto the Morgan Ranch and met a beautiful woman who refused to be intimidated by my temper. They drifted off to sleep, Violet's braided hair draped over Everett's shoulder. Two souls so perfectly intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The years continued their steady march, bringing more joy than sorrow. Rose married a young rancher from the north, a man who loved horses as much as she did, and they settled on a piece of Morgan Turner land to start their own operation. Jacob married a schoolteacher from Sacramento, a quiet woman with a quick smile who fit into the family as if she had always been there. Grandchildren came, 5 in total, filling the ranch with laughter and chaos. Everett proved to be as devoted a grandfather as he was a father, spending hours teaching the little ones to ride and rope and care for the land. His temper, that legendary fury that had once made grown men scatter, was now nothing but a memory. In its place was a patient, gentle man who met challenges with wisdom instead of rage. Violet watched her husband playing with their grandchildren one summer afternoon, her heart so full of love it almost hurt. This man, who had arrived at her ranch broken and angry, had transformed into someone who brought light wherever he went. She thought about all the nights he had braided her hair, all the quiet moments of tenderness, all the ways he had shown his love through actions rather than words. As if sensing her gaze, Everett looked up and smiled, that special smile he reserved just for her. He said something to the children that made them giggle, then walked over to where Violet sat in a rocking chair on their porch. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her and taking her hand. "How lucky I am. How blessed we are. How grateful I am that you rode onto my ranch all those years ago and decided to stay." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "The luck was all mine, and we both know it. You took a chance on a man who did not deserve it and loved me into becoming someone who did." They sat together, watching their grandchildren play, secure in the knowledge that the legacy they had built would continue long after they were gone. The ranch was thriving, their children were happy, and the love between them burned as bright as ever. That evening, as always, Everett braided Violet's hair. Her hair was more silver than brown now, and his hands moved a bit slower than they once had, but the ritual remained sacred. Every stroke of the brush was a prayer of thanksgiving, every twist of the braid a reaffirmation of their bond. "I love you," Everett murmured as he tied off the braid with a silk ribbon. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." Violet turned and kissed him, tasting salt and sweetness and 30 years of shared life. "I love you too. You are my heart, Everett Turner. You always have been and you always will be." They settled into bed, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been for 3 decades, and drifted off to sleep with smiles on their faces and peace in their hearts. Outside, the ranch breathed around them, a living testament to love and perseverance and the transformative power of finding someone who sees you not for what you are, but for what you can become. The man every hand had once feared for his temper had found redemption in the gentle act of braiding hair like silk each night, and in doing so had discovered that he was capable of far more love than he ever imagined. And the woman who had taken a chance on him, who had seen past the anger to the wounded soul beneath, had gained a partner whose devotion never wavered, whose love grew deeper with each passing year. It was a story written in the dust of California ranges, in the whisper of wind through oak trees, in the steady rhythm of hoofbeats, and the soft murmur of bedtime rituals. It was a story of redemption and transformation, of love conquering fear, of two people building something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. And every night, as Everett Turner braided his wife's hair with gentle hands that once knew only violence, he thanked whatever force had brought him to the Morgan Ranch and into the arms of the woman who had saved him, simply by believing he was worth saving. Their story became legend in the valley, passed down through generations of ranch hands and neighbors. People spoke of the cowboy with the terrible temper who was gentled by love, of the ranch owner who saw past reputation to the man within. Children grew up hearing how Everett braided Violet's hair each night, treating it like the finest silk, and they understood that this was what love looked like. Patient, consistent, tender in the small moments that make up a life. As the couple grew old together, their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, aged like fine wine into something rich and complex and irreplaceable. They had weathered every storm together, celebrated every triumph, mourned every loss. They had built an empire from dust and determination, raised children who honored their legacy, and loved each other with a fierce devotion that inspired everyone who witnessed it. And when, many years later, they passed from this world within days of each other, too interconnected to survive long apart, the ranch hands said it was fitting. They had lived as one, and they departed as one, leaving behind a legacy of love that would endure for generations. On their headstone, placed on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, was inscribed a simple truth. Every hand on the ranch feared his temper, but he braided her hair like silk each night. In love we find redemption. In redemption we find home. And in the little cabin where they had spent so many happy years, their great-grandchildren found a worn leather journal filled with Everett's handwriting. It chronicled their courtship, their marriage, their life together, and on the very last page, written in a shaking hand just days before his death, were these words: "To whoever reads this, love fearlessly, forgive generously, treat the one you love with the tenderness you would use to braid silk. Life is short and precious, and the greatest legacy we leave is not measured in acres or dollars, but in the hearts we touch and the love we share. I was a broken man who found salvation in the eyes of a brave woman, and I spent every day of our marriage trying to deserve the gift she gave me. If I succeeded even a fraction, then my life was worthwhile. Love made me whole. Love gave me purpose. Love, in the end, is all that matters. The journal was preserved and passed down through the family, a testament to a love that had transformed two people, and, in doing so, had created something beautiful that would last far beyond their mortal years. The Morgan Turner Ranch continued to thrive, generation after generation, built on the foundation of that first extraordinary love story. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the valley, ranch hands swear they can see two figures sitting on the porch of the old cabin, one gently braiding the other's hair as the sun sets over the California hills they loved so well. It is said that true love never really dies, that it echoes through time, and in that place where Everett and Violet built their forever, love remains as tangible as the earth beneath their feet and as eternal as the stars overhead. Their story ended not with tragedy but with triumph, not with regret but with fulfillment. They had lived fully, loved completely, and left the world better than they found it. What more could any soul hope for than a life well lived and a love that endures beyond death itself? In the end, the cowboy who once ruled through fear learned to lead through love, and the woman who gambled on his redemption won a prize beyond measure. Together they proved that no one is beyond saving, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that the simplest gestures like braiding hair each night with gentle, careful hands can be the truest expression of devotion. Their legacy lived on in every sunset over the ranch, in every child who learned that tenderness and strength are not opposites but complements, in every couple who built their love on a foundation of patience and care and nightly rituals that said, "I choose you more eloquently than words ever could." And so the story concludes not with an ending but with a beginning, for every person who heard their tale and was inspired to love more bravely, forgive more freely, and treat their beloved with the care one would use to handle silk. Everett and Violet Turner's love story became immortal not because it was perfect, but because it was real, and in its reality, others found hope for their own happily ever after.